Hi, my name is Emma Berry and I serve as the Communities and Transportation Project Manager for the Coastal Conservation League. One of our highest priority issues right now is our Save Our Sea Islands campaign, where we are working to stop the I-526 Mark Clark extension from being funded. First, a brief overview of where the idea for the extension of I-526, also called Mark Clark Expressway, originated. In the 1960s, these inner belt loop highways were really popular as a way to build infrastructure in cities that would connect people from point A to point B. This is an antiquated and outdated interstate design, and it's not something we see being built anymore. But this is where the original idea for 526 came from. This outdated highway project is something the Conservation League has been fighting for decades now. This photo is actually taken from 2016 with some former Conservation League colleagues and partners that we still work with on this project today. The current proposal for the Mark Clark extension, which would be funded should the 2024 sales tax pass, would essentially extend the highway from where it currently terminates on Savannah Highway. It would extend across the West Ashley Greenway and through neighborhoods, across the Stoner River onto Johns Island, where there would be 2 touchdown points on River Road, and then cross the Stoner River again onto James Island, where it would wipe out 46 acres of the James Island County Park. There would be another touchdown point on Riverland Drive, and then the extension would connect to the James Island Connector, funneling traffic downtown onto the peninsula on Calhoun Street. There are 2 phases proposed. The first would be built on Johns Island, and phase 2 would be built on James Island. This is the current bridge that goes over the Stoner from James Island to Johns Island. As an example of what this extension would look like going across the Stoner River in 2 different places. This photo is taken off of Rushland Landing in Ariana Jones Island, where one of the exit points would touch down and cut through. As you can see, there are some really critical wetlands in this area, and putting a bridge like the one we saw in the previous slide through this would destroy a lot of wetlands. This is the Stoner River taken from the neighborhood in West Ashley where 526 will cut through. This is a community pier, and this is what it looks like right now. We worked with our partners at Kittlestone and Associates to help us visualize what some of these impacts would look like. So here's a rendering to show what the views from this neighborhood pier would look like if the 526 extension is built. So let's take a look at the numbers. The extension will add 9.5 miles of road. It would add 2 more bridges over the Stoner River. It would cost $2.3 billion to build. 38 acres of wetlands would be destroyed. 46 acres of James Island County Park would be wiped out. And there would be 92 parcel takings, meaning the land that homes and businesses currently sit on would be either fully or partially taken under eminent domain. This photo is of Ellis Creek on James Island, a small neighborhood creek where 526 would cut through. The cost of the 526 extension has ballooned over the years. For reference, in 2016 it cost $420 million to build. It now costs $2.3 billion. In looking at funding for it, there is no money from the federal government for this project because they don't see it as a high priority or of importance. The state somewhat agrees, capping their contribution at $420 million, the cost of 526 in 2016. So the state would contribute 18% of the current estimated cost. And that funding is contingent on our local government funding the rest of the project, which would be $1.9 billion or 82% of the project. So where is Charleston County going to find $1.9 billion to build 9.5 miles of road? From us, from the citizens of Charleston County. Sales taxes are used to fund things like road projects, greenbelt projects, bike and pedestrian infrastructure, and other things. In Charleston County, we currently have 2 half-cent sales taxes in place, one from 2004 and one from 2016. But the county is still proposing to fund another sales tax, which would replace the one from 2004. Although it's not written in the ballot language, the I-526 extension is the only priority project. This means that the fund will first go to funding the roadway, and then whatever is left over will fund other projects. At its current cost, the extension takes up 34% of the tax. This doesn't include the debt services that it would take to fund this, bringing the percentage closer to 46%. As you can see, additionally, Greenbelt funding is less, CARTA and bus rapid transit operations are substantially less than in the 2016 sales tax. And again, the Mark Clark extension is the only priority project on the list and the only one guaranteed to get funding. So that 15% that you see of potential projects in the 2024 pie chart, there's no guarantee that any of those projects will get funded. It's also important to note that the 2004 sales tax will not run out until 2027 at the earliest. This 2024 sales tax that the county is asking us to vote on would not go into effect for 3 years at the earliest. So why are we voting on a tax that wouldn't even be used for several years? The answer is to fund the I-526 extension. So $2.3 billion is a lot of money. How do you put that into perspective? Here in this chart are some examples of other projects across the county and how much they cost. I think some noteworthy ones to really point out and focus on are ones like the Highway 41 improvements. This would cost $148 million or 6.4% of Mark Clark. When this project was first proposed, it was the most expensive road project Charleston County had ever undertaken. Another noteworthy one to point out is the Low Country Rapid Transit. This is a bus line that is being planned from Somerville to downtown that costs $625 million or 27% of Mark Clark extension. It's also important to note that there's a lot of funding from the federal government, so we're only paying a fraction of this price. The same goes for the Peninsula Perimeter Protection Project, also known as the Seawall Downtown. It's $1.1 billion, so just shy of 50% of what Mark Clark would cost. But once again, the federal government is funding it over 60% of the project. So let's take a look at the route again and try to visualize what this would look like and what the impacts would be for our communities. Community members in their homes, but also to our wetlands and our open spaces and protected areas like the James Island County Park. One particular area of concern is impacts to communities and loss of land. 92 parcel takings means 92 people will lose all or parts of their land. Because of the wetland destruction and the addition of so much impervious surface from the road, we would see an increase in flooding. There would also be noise, air, and light pollution. It is also commonly cited that there are several health impacts that come with living near a major roadway. In these photos, both of these houses will have the extension running right next door to them, through their yards actually. The photo on the top right, that's where the highway will run through to Riverland Drive on James Island. And this is Delaney, a community of family that has lived there for generations. But as you can see by the proposed route map, many of them will be displaced. The proposed route perpetuates environmental injustice. We are sure to see rural gentrification on Johns Island, specifically around Jesse Elizabeth Road, where one of the touchdown points is. The Pinckney and Geddes communities, as well as Stevens and Whaley, will be impacted. We will also see significant impacts to communities on James Island, like the historic African-American settlement community Ferguson Village, also known as Downcut, and the Crosscut community. Here you can see part of where Ferguson Village is on Riverland Drive. And this is where the extension would touch down. They would have additional lanes to merge on and off the interstate. Those lanes would go where we see these live oak trees right now, and they would sit pretty much right up to the front door of many of these homes along this road. These people would have a partial taking of their property, not a full taking, so they would be left to live with a major roadway right outside their front door. It's difficult to visualize how severely this landscape would change, so we worked with Kittleson and Associates to create renderings to show what these places would look like should the I-526 extension be built. Here we have a rural 2-lane road on Riverland Drive. You've got trees to the right, marsh to the left, but with the extension that would all change. Here we see it cutting through the marsh and trees. It's also important to note that these 4 lanes would continue back into the current 2-lane roads, creating massive traffic choke points. It's important to understand the full extent of the impacts like these. Kittlesons and Associates helped us to build maps to show the primary, secondary, and tertiary impacts. You can see the difference between those 3 types of impacts here. Primary impacts are full property takes or acquisitions, partial property takes or acquisitions, compromising development or redevelopment potential, loss of primary direct access, loss of tree canopy, or existing character and separation of neighborhoods. Secondary impacts are loss or degradation of access due to medians or proximity to ramps, eventual change or increase in lane use intensity or use, direct increase in traffic, and direct increase in noise. Tertiary impacts are visual impacts from structures, loss of habitat or wildlife corridors, character change in the area, indirect increase in noise, and an increase in commercial traffic intrusion. Here we have a map of where the extension would connect to the James Island connector. And as you can see, the area around it would be highly impacted by several levels of various impacts. Looking on Johns Island, this photo shows Seven Oaks, where the interstate extension would come down and exit onto River Road. As you can see, it's pretty rural in this area still, but adding this intersection would change a lot of that. It's safe to assume that where we still see some rural areas eventually, that will be turned into more commercial uses like fast food restaurants, gas stations, apartment complexes, and things like that, because that's what happens when you build roads like this. This is the area we were just looking at to give you an idea of where the bridge would come down before it crosses over the Stono onto James Island. Here we see the total impacts of the entire area. One of the main arguments made in favor of the extension is that there is too much traffic on Johns Island and it's only going to get worse. Well, it will definitely get worse if we build 526. There's a concept called induced demand where when you build roads and you add extra capacity, you then find that the capacity becomes filled until it's overwhelmed with traffic again from more people moving into and living in the area. And then you have to widen the road to accommodate all of the extra traffic. We see this right now with the current 526 interstate, where they're currently having to widen it because it's at capacity. A really good example of this is like looking at Mount Pleasant and how when 526 was built there, the neighborhoods and subdivisions that popped up from that. This is what Mount Pleasant looked like in 1985. For reference, the road at the bottom is Savannah Highway, and Highway 41 is a road cutting right through the middle of the photo. The 526 interstate was built in 1992. Construction of development started around the same time as the construction of the road. This is what Mount Pleasant looked like in 2005, about 10 years after 526 was built. A pretty massive difference in the span of 20 years with the addition of an interstate. The Berkeley-Charleston-Dorchester Council of Governments had a travel demand model created which evaluated the level of service for the Mark Clark extension and Johns Island roads in 2040. As you can see, while there are a couple of A and B rated areas, we still see massive numbers of D, E, and F service, which are the worst levels of service, and where traffic exceeds capacity or comes close to exceeding. As you see, you still have massive issues along River Road, if 526 is built, and Maybank Highway as well. Savannah Highway is at a level of service F from the extension being created. There are often arguments that we will be alleviating traffic from Savannah Highway, but really what we'll be doing is just adding another way for people on Johns Island to get to Savannah Highway and further add to the traffic that is currently there. This is where 526 currently terminates in West Ashley and what it would look like if we were to extend it in this area. And here you see significant impacts as well. So if the 526 extension isn't the answer, then what is? There are other road projects that need to be completed around Johns Island and the other sea islands in the area that would help alleviate traffic. One of these projects is the completion of the Maybank Pitchforks, which would redirect some of the traffic coming on and off of Johns Island. Currently, only the northern pitchfork has been completed, but the southern pitchfork is needed to really begin seeing improvements here. We also have the main road flyover, James Island intersection improvements, and Savannah Highway improvements. All of these were on the project list on the 2016 sales tax and have not been completed, and in some cases even started. When you look at the total cost of these projects, it still only comes out to about 15% of the proposed cost of the I-526 Mark Clark extension. So if we take a look at those numbers again, we would be getting 9.5 miles of road at the cost of 2 new bridges polluting the Stoner River, destroying 38 acres of wetlands, wiping out nearly 50 acres of the James Island County Park, and either fully or partially taking 92 pieces of land, all for the price tag of $2.3 billion. So is it worth it? It's up to us to decide. Have your say when you vote this November. At the bottom of your ballot, there will be a local questions section. We encourage you to vote no on both questions 1 and 2. Besides voting no on November 5th, what else can you do to stop this destructive roadway? Share this video with your friends and neighbors, as well as other materials found on the Conservation League social media pages and website. Tell your neighbors you're voting no by placing a yard sign in your front yard. Write a letter to the editor or an op-ed and submit it to the local papers. Sign the petition and visit SaveOurSeaIslands.com for more opportunities to gauge and to learn more. When thinking about this sales tax and the 526 extension, the question I always ask myself is, what could we do with $5.4 billion in Charleston County? A whole lot more than a destructive roadway that will leave our communities vulnerable and cause more traffic. Again, I'm Emma Berry, and I thank you for staying engaged on this important issue. Please reach out to me or anyone else at the Coastal Conservation League with any questions.